Emily and Tom, that's right. Emily and Tom, hello. I'm with Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary. Well, Wes Streeting, it's good news for the Tory party, waiting list falling 5 months in a row.
Well, I don't know why Rishi Sunak's doing a victory lap. Waiting lists are higher than they were when he became Prime Minister. He's promised to cut NHS waiting lists. And you also look at the performance standards on things like A&E, ambulance response times. They are shockingly bad to the extent that people can no longer be certain that whether they dial 999 with suspected heart attack or stroke or walk into A&E, that they're going to be seen on time in the right way. So I think by now, hopefully, people have reached a conclusion that the longer the Conservatives are in power, the longer patients will wait. Labour has a proud record on the NHS, the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction on record. But even more importantly, when looking to the future, we've got a plan to get our NHS back on its feet, whether that's 2 million more appointments a year to cut waiting lists, fully costed, fully funded through extra evening and weekend working, doubling the number of scanners so that people get diagnosed earlier, treated faster, training up thousands more GPs and cutting through red tape. I mean, I could go on and on, Chris, and the point is that unless you have that comprehensive plan that looks at the whole system, you're not going to get the NHS out of this terrible mess the Conservatives have put us in. And the longer they're in power, the longer patients will wait.
Well, Wes, we've been asked our GB News viewers today for their questions for you. There is some cynicism about whether you can do what you're going to say. Simon asked, will you have the political will to take on the unions who might try and frustrate your attempts to use more private care to try and clear these waiting lists?
But I think people can see that I'm prepared to put people's noses out of joint to do the right thing when it comes to patients, getting people seen faster. I've been accused, Chris, as people have seen in recent days and weeks and months actually, of wanting to privatise the NHS, that over my dead body would we privatise the NHS. I think one of the best things about it is that it's a public service and that when you fall ill, you don't have to worry about the bill. But we've got in the private sector spare capacity. Those who can afford it are paying to go private. They are being seen faster. Working class people who can't afford it are being left behind. And so what I'd say to my critics is, you look those people in the eye and you tell them that you're prepared to see them wait longer because of your left-wing principles. I don't think that's right. I'm prepared to take on those arguments and do the right thing by patients, because I came into politics to help people from working class backgrounds like mine, to make sure everyone in this country gets a fair crack, and that's what a Labour government will do.
If you could clear that list with using the private sector for all of it, would you?
If you could, I would. I mean, I think it's got to be a balance, and that's why, as well as using spare private sector capacity, I've said, look, over time, we've got to make sure we've got, the capacity in the NHS that the NHS needs, and, take our 2 million extra appointments. What we're doing is taking the approach that we've seen actually at that hospital right across the road from us here in Westminster, of making sure that you get your waiting list down faster, using those extra capacity in evenings and weekends, paying their staff to do it. But this shouldn't just be happening in hospitals in the middle of London. This should be happening right across the country. And we will fund that by clamping down on tax avoidance, because we prioritise doctors, not tax dodgers.
Another question here from Alan. He asked, will you continue to allow A&E to be used as an extension of a doctor's surgery rather than, as its name suggests, accident and emergency?
No, and look, the crazy thing about this is that if someone can get a GP appointment, it costs the NHS about 40 quid. They walk into A&E, it costs the NHS about £400. So it's worse for patients being stuck in A&E, it's also more expensive for taxpayers. And that's why, as well as training up thousands more GPs, because poor old GPs, there are thousands fewer now than there were in 2015, we're also going to cut through some of the red tape that holds them back. They have about 40 accountability measures, a lot of which distract them from doing what they enjoy doing, patients really value them doing, and all the evidence says we need, which is, what you and I would call the family-doctor relationship, and what the NHS jargon calls continuity of care. That means people can see that family doctor, have that relationship, and get a GP appointment rather than going through the 8 a.m. scramble, or worse still, ending up in A&E.
David asked to ask you, what is Labour's actual plan to provide the necessary economic growth to fund the NHS?
Well, look, we've got a serious plan to get the economy growing again, whether that's our industrial strategy that will see us support new green jobs, Great British Energy, for example, making sure that this country invests in its energy industry. It has its own sovereign capability, isn't reliant on foreign energy, but also we don't have this absurd situation where European taxpayers own our energy suppliers and British taxpayers don't see a return on that investment. That will create more jobs, give Britain its energy security back and cut bills. And that's just one plank of our economic plan. You take things like life sciences, for example. We've got some of the best doctors in this country and some of the best life sciences, but our NHS and our life sciences sector could work so much better together. That in turn would create jobs, make sure we're delivering cutting-edge medicine in this country and help to get our economy growing again. And I'd also just say on this, as with the NHS, you can judge us on our record. If the economy had grown under this government at the rate that it grew under the last Labour government, there'd be tens of billions of pounds more available to invest in our public services or to put back into people's pockets. But we are paying a heavy price for the Conservatives' low growth, high tax, high inflation, high interest rate economy.
And Wes Streeting, while I've got to ask you about the CAS review yesterday. You came out in favour of it. You said you support the recommendations. Do you owe an apology to your colleague Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP, who has fought very hard on this space and been vilified by her colleagues?
Well, I've said before that I think the way that Rosie and actually other people have been treated in terms of the abuse they've faced for speaking up is appalling. I've apologised before and I have no hesitation in doing so again. I think one of the things that Dr. Cass throws up in her report, which has been pretty shocking in terms of the failure of these very vulnerable children and young people, is that we have had a toxic political debate in this country where both people who are raising concerns have been shut down and also we've had trans people who are often at the worst end of the statistics on being victims of hate crime and suffering mental ill health, suicide, self-harm. They have been absolutely appallingly treated too. And I think as political leaders, we owe it to trans people, to campaigners, to conduct this debate in a much more respectful and responsible way. And that's why, even with the general election hurtling towards us, I've said to the government, I'm absolutely prepared to work with them on the implementation of the CAS review. And if Labour wins the general election, we're not taking anything for granted. We will implement the CAS review too.